The world has been waiting for Rasheeda to come out of the shadows and tell the truth in an emotional and intimate sit-down. The reality star spoke out about the horrifying assault by male VCs that devastated the hip-hop scene and left fans in disbelief. What Diva said made it very evident that some wounds are too severe to ever heal, despite the admirers' hopes for forgiveness and reconciliation. She didn't hold back as she opened up about her unfiltered feelings of betrayal and distrust that still plague her. There were several betrayals of covered instances, and the atmosphere in the interview room grew stronger as Rasheeda prepared to go deeper into the events that transpired after the warnings. In-depth discussions of Manny's startling disclosures, the responses of her loved ones, and the reasons why this perspective might have just become the most incendiary fallout reality ever will be covered tonight. As her followers were horrified to see that even some of their reality show producers apparently attempted to hush Rasheeda after men dreadfully warned her to stay, her emotions were running high. It was alienating, she explained, to be betrayed, not only by someone she trusted, but also by a community she helped create. Friends who had previously stood by her began to turn away from her, fearing the backlash if they continued, and she was forced to keep quiet during every phone call and unexpected knock on the door. Rasheeda admitted that she had spent many hours debating whether to defend herself or to quietly depart out of concern that it would harm the franchise's reputation. But whenever she felt like giving up, she thought of the phrase when they asked her why decent people get injured. She used her child's expression as a compass, urging her to tell the truth no matter how soiled it became. She understood that remaining silent would just give the assailant more power, but the internal struggle was ripping her apart. Shortly after the incident, she remembered meeting with her legal team in a clean, frigid office where the duty seemed overwhelming. Despite the terrible backlash Rasheeda may face if she spoke up publicly, her lawyer cautioned her that she was committed to seeking justice for more than anonymous threats, disturbing texts, and odd phone calls. Fans are in disbelief since she stated that bringing accusations was a deliberate move to protect herself and all women who had ever been silenced by manipulation, fear, or allegiance, rather than only an emotional one. Rasheeda led by example. When she discussed the pain she had after seeing messages on social media that defended Myers from people she had trusted and celebrated alongside her, she became chilly after learning that several of her closest friends were supposedly backing him behind her back because of the persistent. Every time Rasheeda thought about leaving and acting as if nothing had occurred, she reenacted the horrifying attack in her mind and realized she couldn't ignore it. According to reports, powerful figures in the entertainment world reportedly urged her to fight while men were incarcerated, shocking fans. Kirk pushed Rasheeda to arrange a secret meeting with a few courageous friends, while other family members pleaded with her to keep quiet in order to keep things peaceful. Rasha refused to back down when the world sought to help him by making calls, pulling strings, and making unethical financial offers in an effort to have the charges dropped. While some were too scared to speak up and help her tell the truth, others were willing to put their reputations and safety in danger in order to assist her in revealing the truth about what Rasheeda had discussed. Though she had experienced countless sleepless nights, panic attacks, and agonizing moments of uncertainty when sitting alone in her living room, reading through hateful messages on the internet, wondering if she was strong enough to weather the storm, she knew deep down that she had arrived. There was too much emotional damage to undo, and she had begun a movement. On some nights, Rasheeda thought about quitting the reality show completely since she no longer felt safe there and no longer believed the early lies about family and loyalty. Among the most unpleasant aspects of the discussion was Rasheeda's account of how, as a result of the conflict's reverberating consequences, she started to see odd cars parked near her home and odd faces loitering outside her. Standing by herself, she spoke calmly and had tears in her eyes. As she wrapped up this section of her narrative, Rasheeda vowed to not be silent. Though she was unsure if this was paranoia or fact, she vowed that fear would not deter her from fighting, even if it meant losing her contract or losing funding. She looked straight into the camera without explaining her experience, saying, "You can try to scare me, but I will." In the days following the interview, social media was flooded with supportive comments from fans, some of whom backed Rasheeda. Others doubted her motives, claiming she attempted to destroy a man's life in order to get affection and power. "I owe it to my family, myself, and all women who have been ordered to remain silent." This led to an even more drastic shift in her quest for justice. Perk tried to protect her from the worst of it for hours, but even he couldn't stop the tidal wave. Rasheeda maintained her composure in public despite the pandemonium, but behind closed doors the pressure was too much for her to bear, of negativity that engulfed his family, and Rasheeda acknowledged that she closed her eyes while reading cruel remarks and pondered how people could be so oblivious to the truth while pacing her living room. But every time she considered stepping back, she was reminded of the appalled shouts of the other women who had spoken up about friends she sometimes felt bad about, due to the horrible toll it took on her family's stability and mental health. They had no intention of leaving, and they now view her as a source of strength, so they confided in her. While sorting through her messages one evening, Rashi got a direct message from an unidentified account claiming to have video of the incident. The message promised to prove everything. With relief, Rasheeda shed a tear. Fury, understanding that she now had proof that could refute what she had claimed. She immediately called her lawyer, who advised her that it would be preferable to keep the movie a secret even if revealing it could lead to legal repercussions. Justice ultimately prevailed, and she pressed play with shaking hands. Mendeecees lunged at her and yelled threats during the brawl, which was captured on the blurry film. Fans were left stunned and perplexed, unsure of what to expect, as Rasheeda's crew labored diligently behind the scenes to get ready for the lethal confrontation, which took place in courtrooms. Witnesses were lined up, timelines were reenacted, every detail was examined, and the problem added even more tension. One especially heated night, Rasheeda and Kirk got into a furious disagreement over whether or not to release the video, which Kirk felt would only make things worse. This heated dispute reached a boiling point. Despite threatening to hurt their family and fabricating the events for her own benefit, Rasheeda insisted that telling the truth would hurt her feelings. Rasheeda continued to support the highly crisis management team, even though it felt like betrayal again as others who had first agreed to testify began to back off out of fear of the abuse and threats they would encounter. Rasheeda spent days writing in her journal to make sense of the chaos in her life, and when she revealed in a live interview that she would be bringing a new lawsuit, fans were taken aback. Regardless of how things turned out, the action was audacious, risky, and certain to turn an already tense situation into a full-fledged fight, leaving the family distraught. If she had to, she yelled, "I can't live like this, Kirk. I can't keep pretending everything's good," when Rasheeda fled Atlanta for a few days and retired to a remote cabin where she could clear her mind in a desperate attempt to find some peace. According to reports, he threatened to make sure she regretted it for the rest of her life during a private phone chat with mutual acquaintances. People who heard the threat were shivering, even though Rasheeda was not the target of the danger. He was surprised by the fresh charges according to those close to him, and felt duped by a lady he had formerly regarded as a friend. She would fight for herself and all the voices that had been hushed before her, not letting fear control her decisions. Even though the recording was flawed and unfinished, the damage was done, and public opinion began to turn in Rasheeda's favor after a secret audio appeared online that allegedly showed Mendeecees confessing to some of the attack during a furious dispute with one of his accomplices. But Rasheeda's economic activities failed, and her hometown fans were devastated to see their favorite actress living in constant fear and a prisoner of circumstances because she felt her family had disappeared. Without warning, the emotional toll was often unbearable, but she maintained the appearance that she had survived. With every fresh disclosure raising the stakes, Rasheeda readied herself for the impending court cases, publicity, and personal assaults. The struggle she had fought and survived was far from violent, and she resolved never to be silenced again. Because too much had been revealed and too much had been damaged, she came to the realization that she would never be able to return to that version of herself. During the interview, Rasheeda said she missed the carefree woman who loved passionately, laughed out loud, and thought the journey was worth it, even if it meant walking this dark path alone. However, several brand partnerships withdrew because they were afraid of being pulled into the drama at a heartbreaking point. Forge a new, more robust, and more intelligent course. Additional information about what transpired between her and NZ that fatal night was made public by voice records and witness testimony. What had at first seemed to be a single, isolated outburst was now shown to be a part of a concerning pattern of behavior. After discovering the depth of Rasheeda's suffering, many individuals who had previously doubted her tale now flooded her with love and apologies, shocking her fans. However, Mendeecees grew much more dangerous after the truth was revealed. Late one evening, Rasheeda's security detail found a strange man hanging around her, declaring that he was desperate to repair his deteriorating reputation and would do whatever it took to turn things around. Before he was apprehended, the man flooded the property in his favor, but the experience left her feeling unsettled. Was the intruder a stranger, or had the threats against her finally turned into a real threat? Instead of being forced to leave her own life, Rasheeda resisted intimidation and fortified her defenses, while Kirk struggled to keep their family together while he watched helplessly as the woman he loved was weakened by grief. She rarely slept and often woke up in the middle of the night, covered in the media, and detecting in the water entered the story with such intensity that even seasoned journalists were shocked. Talk programs spoke on every court filing and leaked message, and there was an ongoing discussion about whether Men's Rasheeda grappled with sentiments of betrayal that went deeper than she could communicate behind closed doors as the world watched in a desperate hunt for answers. And Mimi's physical assault had ruined her sense of safety and faith in people. She felt so alone and isolated from an incident that no amount of sympathy could erase, and she spent hours in therapy trying to have a covered deposition with a former friend of Mendes. She readied herself for the upcoming character assassination, understanding that it would require bravery on her part to face the lies and dishonesty, that cross-examination would be severe, and that Mink's lawyers would do all in their ability to undermine her testimony. The testimony stunned the legal community, supporting Rasheeda's case and encouraging her staff to put in endless effort to get her ready for the challenging journey ahead. As supporters gathered around her, more damaging details surfaced, claiming that Mendeecees had boasted about bullying witnesses and fabricating evidence to protect his reputation. They informed her that public opinion was shifting even more in her favor and that there was no amount of preparation that could fully shield her from the suffering that awaited her, but there were half-truths that would soon be used against her. Rasha discovered that Mendeecees was allegedly thinking about taking a plea bargain, which was a startling development. Rasheeda briefly held out hope that this nightmare would end without a cruel public trial, but as she grappled with the prospect of publicly apologizing and accepting a lighter sentence in exchange for dropping the additional charges, she spent days discussing the choice with her lawyers, her family, and her own wounded instincts, questioning whether an apology was enough, and whether a few carefully chosen words could actually heal the damage he had caused. It was a rainy afternoon, and Urshika sat in her lawyer's office, staring at the plea bargain that was presented to her, which appeared to mirror the pain in her heart. Tears filled her eyes and the words jumbled together, reminding her that accepting a settlement meant that Rasheeda stood up to Washington, D.C.'s harsh cross-examination, which was designed to distort her statements and portray her as vengeful and opportunistic by bringing up her previous business relationships and anything else they could to discredit her. They altered her story, claiming that she was now in command of it after having survived it. Outside the courts, supporters gathered and celebrities shared passionate remarks on social media showing their solidarity with. Following weeks of heartfelt testimony and countless tears, the case was ultimately sent to the jury that made the news. The foreman stood his ground as he read the courtroom verdict, and Rasheeda sat with Kirk, holding his hand tightly, and they waited for what felt like an eternity. A final attempt to mount a counterattack was made by Rasheeda's defense team, and men stood up to apologize sincerely in what many perceived as a last-ditch attempt to repair his failing reputation. When the jury returned, the room became silent. It was a part of a much bigger pattern of activity rather than a single episode. She had triumphed in her fight for justice, but the triumph was bittersweet since it brought to mind all that she had sacrificed. Mannix's once glistening career was reduced to ashes when the judge sentenced him to a lengthy prison term, leaving him guilty on all counts. He remained still, his face blanched. After the room erupted in a collective gasp, Rasheeda and her supporters began to cry. She cried, and Kurt took her in his arms and hugged her. Following the decision, Rasheeda spoke to the throng outside the courthouse, explaining. At a moment when it would have been easier to keep quiet, she individually commended survivors, reminding them that their voices were shaking with emotion and that they were not alone.